Welcome back to Taidu Shakuhachi. I am your licensed shakuhachi teacher, and today we're going to be going over to E or not to E, to roll or not to roll. So when do we use E and when do we use roll? Again, from the Discord, which you all should join, we get this question a lot. Why do we use E sometimes and why do we use roll sometimes? So what I mean by this is there's two fingerings that produce the same pitch. So we have E, which is either the second hole covered or second and first hole covered, and then roll, which is all the holes covered. So this note and now in that little short playing of the two, you can hear that they have a distinctive color. E is obviously brighter, it's got a little bit more air to it. Roll is more powerful and more of a deeper sound. Now, in the older scores, when we look at Honkyoku especially, we want to basically treat that as gospel. If the E is written as E, we play it as E. If the roll is played as roll, then we play it as roll. Now, but sometimes we have updates, we can say, or different versions where sometimes we have an E that's written there in one score, and in the other case it's written as a roll. So what do you do in that case? Well, the first thing that I would recommend is do whatever your teacher says to do. Now, let's say you are comparing them and you are kind of looking at it and you're saying, well, something doesn't sound right about this. It's worth trying it out, but there should be a reason behind why you are playing E or playing roll. Now, one of the places I can really understand of why this would be a change is in the piece Kumoi Jishi. Now, sometimes in the piece Kumoi Jishi, you'll see that the score has it written as E. So sometimes you'll have people who play. Now, the actual score version of it, the older score renditions have that note as roll, where you play a roll merry. So now, why is that? Why is that the case in this score where we have a few variations on this? Well, the reason has to do with the old way of tuning and the old way of playing. So the old way of playing, they didn't use half holes. They used head movement, right? So instead of playing this E merry where you would half hole the back here, what they would do is they play a roll merry to get that sound. Now, another thing, this has to do with the scales and how they function. So when we go from one mode to the next mode, you would be dipping the head on the second and the fifth interval, and that's how you would get to those pitches. So when you're playing in the Kumoi mode, which Kumoi Jishi is, starting from the re pitch, roll is now at the second note position, which is then in the meri position. Then su would become into the up position. And that would be the classical way of playing the Kumoi mode. But in our modern playing, we don't have a chi here necessarily. We have either the san no u or the chi merry, so the pitches become a little bit different in the upper register. So because it's more based on the Miyakobushi scale and getting the right pitch, some players have opted to do the E merry instead to have a more reliable and sustainable note rather than playing what the tradition holds, which is playing a roll merry. So in these cases, we can kind of look at it and make a decision for ourselves. Does it sound better for me to play an E merry here or a roll here? But what I would first and foremost recommend is always do what the score says and consult with your teacher. And then if you are going to make a change, make sure it's a very informed change. Now, sometimes in the Sankyoku music, we'll see something like this. It says di-do, di-do. Now, that's more of a set phrase in Sankyoku. So what we should actually be playing there is re-e-di-do. Now, you'll very rarely see that mistake written in scores. It sometimes appears, but most of the time, if you see that re-roll in that type of rhythmic configuration, it's usually a mistake and it should be rendered as re-roll. But this is where it actually becomes more exciting. What about contemporary music, especially when the score doesn't necessarily identify the different types of fingerings that we can do? Do we have liberty to change those fingerings? And well, for myself, I say yes. I think that is what makes the music so exciting when we play contemporary music. We actually have multiple options for all of the notes that we get on our shakuhachi for the most part, and that we can kind of play around with that. So let's say if we have a line that goes right? So I could take that first row and change that out for an E. And then end with a row at the end there, right? So then we have a very nice colorful change. Or I could do, and with the E there, have a little bit more of a subtle ending, a little bit of a lighter note at the end. So basically the quick answer for everything is, in the old scores, be very careful. In the Sankyoku scores, also be very careful. Most of the time what is written is correct. Sometimes you'll get margin corrections, like they'll say in the Yamada Ryu it's played like this, and in the Ikuta Ryu it's played like this. So you can kind of switch back and forth between those. But in general, the Sankyoku scores for the most part are very good in terms of what note is correct and so on. Within the schools, of course, if you compare the scores, it's a whole nother conversation. But where it's exciting and where you can choose and change different types of fingerings is in contemporary music. So have fun with it and see what you can come up with. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.